Huang cried on my shoulder like an innocent child. I tenderly stroked her soft curls, but I couldn't suppress the joy in my heart. The pregnancy test stick we had discarded in the trash clearly showed 2 thick red lines. I said, "Don't cry. Even though it's unexpected, it's still a happy surprise. You should be happy." Huang buried her face deeper. "This is not good for our family at all. I'm not happy. I'm scared. Hubby, I'm really scared." I lifted her face and told her, word by word, "Don't be afraid. We have a house, a car, money, and a daughter. The only thing missing is a son, and now you're pregnant. It's fate, understand, baby?" Huang shook her head with tear-filled eyes. "No, I don't want a second child. I'm just scared." "What are you afraid of? When the baby is born, my parents and my brother and sister-in-law can help you take care of it. If you don't want to breastfeed, we'll feed him the best formula. You can go to work if you want, shop if you want. Nothing will be affected. I'll even sign you up for a good yoga class so you can get back in shape, okay?" I knew Huang was most afraid of getting old and unattractive. Upon hearing this, Hua Ying's swollen, tear-stained eyes widened in terror. "Your parents and your brother and sister-in-law taking care of my child? Have you forgotten how they treated me and Ying?" I said, "The past is the past. Holding on to it is exhausting. Don't worry, they won't treat you like that anymore. For the sake of the baby, they will be grateful to you." Huang shook her head firmly and resolutely. "I don't need their gratitude, nor do I need them to respect the baby. How they treated Ying before, you may forget, but I will never forget it in my lifetime. I won't bring a second child into this world to suffer. It's not fair to him or to Ying." I said, "It won't be like that. Our conditions are so good now. With the whole family loving them, neither child will suffer." Huang sneered, "Don't talk to me about a whole family. I'm the only one who truly loves my child, but my love is already entirely devoted to Ying. If there's another baby, I'm afraid I'll be biased and not love him enough." I said, "How could that be? Both are your flesh and blood. How could you favor one over the other?" Huang stared into my eyes and asked, "Really? Then what about your family's situation?" Hua Ying's words hit my weak spot, and I found myself at a loss for words. I am the second child in my family, and I can't truthfully say that my parents never showed favoritism and treated us all equally. As a boy born during the one-child policy era, I should have been favored, but unfortunately, I was the second son. Even more unfortunate was that my parents mistakenly thought I was a girl, which is why I escaped being aborted and came into this world. From childhood to adulthood, I've heard my mother sigh in front of my aunts countless times. The second one was so quiet in my belly. Everyone said it was a girl, but how did it turn out to be a boy? If I'd known, I wouldn't have given birth. We can't afford to raise 2 boys. When we finish building a house and getting a wife for the eldest, we'll still have to take care of the second one. It's endless worry. So, I knew from a young age that my birth and future were never part of my parents' plan. Only after they arranged everything for my brother would they turn to me. But fate had other plans. My brother's life over these 40 years has been anything but smooth. When he was young, my parents borrowed money to support his education from kindergarten to college, never letting him do any housework or farm work. They gave him the best food and clothes, replaced his bicycles one after another. After graduation, he was dissatisfied with his job arrangement and joined the army. 2 years later, he found army life too hard and insisted on returning home. He found a job but complained about the workload, quit shortly after, got involved in a pyramid scheme, and disappeared for 5 years. Meanwhile, I wore his old clothes, rode his discarded bicycle, and barely made it through junior high. My parents couldn't wait to pull me out of school to work on the farm. By then, I was already an expert at farming, the main labor force at home. I wanted to study further, but my dad said it was useless. Look at your brother, even with a college degree, he didn't get a good job. I wanted to join the army, but my mom said it was pointless. Your brother served for 2 years and still struggled to find work after. In short, I was destined to farm obediently at home. After my brother left, my dad began drinking heavily day and night, often hitting and cursing me when drunk. My mom cried every day, lost her appetite, and only ate dried chili peppers to stimulate her appetite. Soon after, she had a stroke and was bedridden. At 18, I shouldered the family's burdens, working the fields and taking care of my bedridden mother. Years later, my mother's condition improved slightly and my brother returned. My parents, fearful of losing him again, pampered him even more. They took out their life savings to build him a 3-room house and eagerly sought a wife for him. After several failed matchmaking attempts, matchmakers' gossip turned my parents' blame onto me. They said no girl wanted to marry into a family with 2 sons, fearing the heavy burden. Without a word, I followed villagers to work on a construction site. I was young and inexperienced, didn't even bring a bedroll, and slept on planks covered with straw, using a burlap sack as a blanket. I gritted my teeth and swore to live a decent life. 10 years later, the new house became old. My brother was still single, but I married the gentle and beautiful Feng. At that time, I was an apprentice installing aluminum alloy doors and windows, and Feng was a student at a nearby teacher's college. We often met at a small restaurant and eventually got together. Feng was my lucky star. After she graduated and married me, a poor boy, my fortunes changed. First, I took on small projects, which gradually grew bigger. Within a few years, I established my own home decoration company, bought a house and car in the city, and life was going smoothly. The hardships of the past are just that, past. Life is getting sweeter by the day, and I long to add a white, chubby son to our family. My parents' and brother's family came over, trying every possible way to persuade Feng to keep the baby. They were so earnest that they were almost ready to kneel before her. The more they tried to persuade her, the more resistant Feng became. She coldly declared that her pregnancy was her own business and she didn't want anyone else interfering. Dragging her half-paralyzed body, my mom begged her, "Ing, it was my fault in the past. I'm apologizing to you. Please, have pity on this old woman and leave a descendant for the Gao family." Feng responded with a cold smile. "A descendant? Who can guarantee it'll be a boy? Even modern medical tests aren't reliable." Her words made my parents' and brother's family turn red and then pale. I couldn't help them either. They had planted the seeds of their own misfortune and now had to swallow the bitter fruit. My father, swallowing his pride, said, "Feng, our Gao family only has Ying left in this generation. Once she grows up and gets married, the Gao family will be gone. I beg you to give the Gao family a descendant. Tell us what you want, and we'll give it to you, even if it means risking our lives. Just promise to have the baby, and everything can be negotiated." My sister-in-law chimed in, "Feng, it would be great to have a boy, but having another girl is fine too. She could be a companion for Ying. When we're all old, the sisters will have each other to talk to and lean on. Don't worry, I know you're busy with work. You just have the baby, and I'll take care of raising it, treating it even better than my own." Feng seemed to sense something was off and looked at me suspiciously. Knowing they had said enough, I quickly signaled for them to leave. Sure enough, as soon as they left, Feng immediately questioned how they knew about this and why they felt they had the right to interfere in our family matters. I explained that I wanted this child so badly and was afraid I couldn't persuade her on my own, so in desperation, I had asked them to help. Feng didn't press further, but firmly said that she didn't want them coming again and that she didn't want outsiders meddling in our family affairs. I quickly agreed. Feng has always been soft-hearted, but her firm stance this time showed that she really couldn't let go of the past. After Feng and I got married, she would come back to my rural hometown with me during holidays to visit my parents. She would help with washing and cleaning, even washing my brother's clothes. She would squat by the stove, cooking for the whole family. Since my mom couldn't move around well, Feng would make hundreds of dumplings to freeze for later use. When Feng was pregnant and gave birth to our daughter, Ying, the very next day my brother successfully found a match through a blind date. The woman wasn't good-looking, and she was rough, rude, and uneducated. She would snatch food in front of my parents, being picky and noisy while eating. But my brother was already 35, notoriously difficult to find a wife in our rural area. We were grateful he found someone willing to marry him. At that time, Huang was doing her confinement at my parents' house. My parents were thrilled to have a new granddaughter and a new daughter-in-law, but this was the beginning of a nightmare. My brother and his new wife decided to get married within 2 weeks and demanded a large dowry, which my parents couldn't afford. My mom, crying, asked me to help, saying it wasn't easy for my brother to get married at his age. I gave them 100,000 yuan. My parents spent half of it on gold jewelry for the bride. Huang didn't say anything when she found out, but I remembered that when we got married, my parents never offered to buy anything for her. After my brother got married, my mom continued to cook and take care of them. At one point, I had to go abroad, and worried about Huang managing with our 3-month-old daughter, I sent them to my parents' house with some money, asking them to take good care of them. My parents agreed, but when I returned, I found they had given Huang boiled amaranth with soy paste for lunch, while the fridge was full of meat and ribs. I asked why they hadn't cooked something better, and my mom said, "Your brother and his wife are visiting her family. We'll cook when they come back, or they won't have any." When I opened the pot and found an egg, I was about to peel it for Huang, but my mom said, "That's for your sister-in-law. She'll be hungry when she gets back," so I kept it warm for her. I was furious, but Huang quickly comforted me, saying she was full and asked me to take her home. On the way back, I lost my temper. "Why can't you stand up to them? Why are you so weak?" Huang replied, "Mom has put all her effort into ensuring my brother's happiness. She cooked only 1 egg to make my sister-in-law feel valued and important. I don't mind. Now that we can afford anything, eating some amaranth is healthy, like organic food." I felt incredibly lucky to have such an understanding and considerate wife. However, my parents didn't see it that way. To them, a sensible child deserved to be taken for granted. Maybe because I was a dispensable member of the family, my wife and child were even more insignificant. One New Year's Eve, we returned for the family reunion. My daughter Ying grabbed a chicken wing with her hand. My sister-in-law exploded, scolding her so loudly that Ying started crying. My parents didn't comfort her. My dad scolded her. "Your aunt loves chicken wings. How can she eat it if it's dirty?" I was angry. She's only 10 months old. She doesn't understand. A grown-up missing a bite won't starve. My sister-in-law, hearing this, started crying loudly. My parents were terrified, pleading with her. When she wouldn't stop, my mom turned on me. "You've spoiled that girl. No manners at all. If you can't behave, then leave. Your sister-in-law is pregnant with a boy, my eldest grandson. If you scare her, I'll risk my life to fight you." I flipped the table in anger, and Huang quickly pulled me away. "Don't scare the child, let's go." The more Huang tried to keep the peace, the more my mom bullied her, pointing at her and yelling, "You troublemaker," always turning my son against me. "Get out, the Gao family doesn't need you." My mom went too far. She was bullying the weak. This time, Huang didn't hold back. She said, "We are all women, all daughters-in-law, all mothers, and we will all grow old someday. I won't come back, because I don't want to end up like you when I'm old." My parents spoiled my sister-in-law beyond measure just for the hope of having a grandson. Villagers would say that if my sister-in-law felt hungry in the middle of the night, one call to my mom, and she'd get up to cook, and my dad would deliver the food with a flashlight. After much anticipation, my sister-in-law finally went into labor, only to give birth to a girl. My parents' attitude plummeted. Fearing for her position, my sister-in-law quickly became pregnant again, but due to severe uterine infection, she had to undergo an abortion and a hysterectomy, losing the ability to conceive. When my niece was just 100 days old, my sister-in-law claimed she needed to eat well to regain strength and insisted my brother take her to a restaurant. They left the sleeping baby in the car and spent 2 hours at a buffet. When they returned, the baby, wedged in the back seat, had stopped breathing. My mom was in the hospital for 3 days before regaining consciousness. Her first request was to have my brother call me. I told Huang about these events, and she cried her heart out, saying the baby was innocent. I tentatively suggested she taking Ying to visit my parents and my sister-in-law, but She flatly refused, saying, "My child is also innocent. I can't bring her to be hurt by others because of my soft heart." I knew she would never forgive my family and couldn't move past the unfair treatment she had endured. To persuade her to keep this baby, I could only appeal to her feelings for me. I told her that if she insisted on aborting the baby, our marriage would be over. I couldn't tolerate my woman being so cruel as to kill our unborn child. Huang, soft-hearted as she was, finally succumbed to my moral coercion and agreed to keep the baby. The condition was that no matter the baby's gender, I had to love it well and ensure there would be no favoritism between our children. I agreed to everything. When Huang was 32 weeks pregnant, I took her for a walk in the garden downstairs. My impatient brother and sister-in-law came again with 2 big bags of baby supplies. Despite everything, Huang felt pity for them and invited them in. My sister-in-law's true nature soon emerged, subtly suggesting that Huang should let her raise the baby. Huang said, "Thank you for the offer, sister-in-law, but I can raise my own child." My sister-in-law got anxious. "Huang, don't forget you didn't plan for this second child. It's not favored at home, so why keep it? Give it to me, and I'll treat it like royalty, believe it or not." Huang realized something was wrong, and her eyes demanded an explanation from me. I glared at my sister-in-law, hoping she would shut up, but she blurted out, "Are you backing out now? You promised Mom you'd give me the second baby." If I hadn't swapped Huaying's birth control, she wouldn't have gotten pregnant. Huaying's face turned pale. I shouted for my brother to take his wife away, but Huaying had already stormed out. I found Huaying late at night, curled up on a bench by the lake. When I picked her up, she was limp. I scolded her for torturing herself, and she weakly said, "I wanted to die, but I have Ying. What would she do without me?" "Your family is terrifying." I apologized repeatedly, regretting agreeing to my mom's plan and deceiving Huang. I promised that once the baby was born, I'd raise it myself and never hand it over to my brother and sister-in-law. Huang turned her face away and said coldly, "Let's get a divorce." I knew Huang had lost all faith in me. There was no trace of affection in her eyes. I was terrified, but we still had Ying and the baby on the way. With these 2 precious ties, I hoped there was still a chance for us to mend things. Early the next morning, Huang suddenly showed signs of premature labor, experiencing severe abdominal pain and her water breaking. I rushed her to the emergency room, running red lights all the way. The waiting was excruciating. I was anxious, scared, and helpless. I had no one to rely on. I called my parents and in-laws. My father rushed over in a cab. Huang was in critical condition, and the doctor asked me to sign a form to decide whether to save her or the baby if it came to that. At this moment, my father unexpectedly knelt before me. I was stunned. He said, "Son, your mom is bedridden and might not wake up one day. Dad is also in poor health. Your brother has no children, and your sister-in-law can't have any. You can't just watch them grow old and have no one to rely on. We raised you, and we don't ask for much in return. We just beg you for this one thing. Let us see a grandson while we're still alive. Give your brother and sister-in-law a child to care for in their old age. You're still young. If anything happens to Huang, we will do everything to find you another wife, I promise you." My father's head banged on the floor, and it felt like my heart was bleeding. This frail old man was, after all, my father who raised me. Over the years, I came to understand their reasons. They favored my brother because he was the firstborn. As Huang said, parents often give all their love to the first child. Now, they protected my brother out of sympathy for the weaker one. If I were in their shoes, I would also take more care of the less capable child. Parents' hearts are full of love and care, and their actions weren't wrong. My parents wanted a grandson, my brother and sister-in-law wanted a child, and I wanted a son. With trembling hands, I signed my name, choosing to save the child. I knew I was despicable and that I was destined to betray the woman who deeply loved me. After more than 20 hours of emergency surgery, both Huang and the baby were temporarily safe. My second child was a boy, born 6 weeks early but weighing 8 pounds and 8 ounces, with chubby cheeks like he was holding candy. My father looked at his grandson through the glass, tears streaming down his face. My in-laws stayed by Huang, who had just fought her way back from the brink of death, wiping away their tears. I thought everything would get better. The Gao family had an heir, my son would grow up, and my wife would gradually forget all the pain caused by my family. I believed we would reconcile, and I would love her and our children. We would be happy together again. But how could fate allow someone as heartless as me to have a happy ending? At the crucial moment, I had chosen to save the child over the wife who had been by my side for over a decade. 3 days later, my premature son still left me. I didn't dare tell Huang the bad news. I wanted her to focus on recovering. We still had our daughter and each other. But it was as if Huang was spiritually connected to the baby. She calmly asked, "Did the baby pass away?" I couldn't hold it in anymore and broke down, crying at her bedside. Huang said, "From now on, letting Ying be raised by my parents. Find someone else to give you a son, so you'll have someone to take care of you when you grow old." I refused to let her say such things. I told her, "We'll raise Ying together, take care of our parents, and when we grow old, she'll look after us." I swore that the parents I referred to were my in-laws. However, Huang misunderstood. She gave a bitter smile and asked me to leave. She wanted to be alone with her parents. At 2 in the morning, the hospital room echoed with my mother-in-law's heart-wrenching cries and my father-in-law's mournful sobs. My world collapsed. I knew the heavens were angry, punishing me severely, taking away everything I loved, my devoted wife and chubby son. My only remaining family, Ying, was taken back to my in-laws' home. From then on, I became a homeless orphan in this world. My parents had said that the whole family would risk their lives to save the child, but it turned out they were only risking the lives of my wife and son. Later, they did not sell everything to find me another wife. Instead, they repeatedly urged me to get Ying back from my in-laws, claiming she belonged to the Gao family and should care for her father and grandparents when she grew up. They insisted, even if it goes to court, the Gao family is in the right. I ignored their incessant nagging and silently handled my affairs. I sold all my assets, left enough money to support my parents, and moved to the small town where my in-laws lived. My in-laws, devastated by the loss of their daughter, had turned white-haired. Fortunately, Ying was adorable and understanding, calling them grandma and grandpa, bringing sweet comfort to their hearts. I often watched the 3 of them playing in the nearby park, with Ying bouncing around, growing more like her mother each day. I took care of my in-laws' household, and although they did not reject me, they were not close to me either. I knew they couldn't forgive me, but I had to fulfill my duty to them. With Huang gone, I was their only child. A year later, my mother's condition worsened. My brother sued me, demanding that I take on the responsibility of caring for our parents. I brought my mother to the small town and silently tended to her, just as I had done more than a decade ago. My mother could no longer speak, her lips trembling, and murky tears constantly streamed from her eyes. We had nothing to say to each other. This silent existence continued between us until she passed away. I knew she might have wanted to ask for my forgiveness or seeing Ying one last time, but I couldn't grant either wish. My father, since my mother's death, refused to return to our hometown. Over the years, his excessive drinking had clouded his mind. He would often mutter that my brother beat him, forced him to work in the fields, and my sister-in-law denied him food and demanded all his money. One day, like a child, he suddenly grabbed my hand and said, "Why hasn't Huang come home yet? I miss her and my grandson. I want to eat the chive dumplings she makes."